In just over a decade, Len Cooper oversees and has opened 22 offices across the country with over 1,300 licensed agents by providing mentorship and industry training. His experience in annuities, life insurance, and education provides exceptional value to a large variety of individuals, businesses, and organizations. And I'm excited for you to meet him on today's podcast. Let's cue the intro and we'll jump right in. I've spent the last 20 years studying, teaching, and coaching people to find their greatness and take their lives to the next level. Along the way, it's become evident that emotions are at the root of everybody's successes and failures. Worry and fear are the enemies, and it's time to forge the armor and earn the tools to overcome the two things that could single-handedly destroy your future. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson, and I'm a life coach, a peak performance trainer, and I'm the emotions guy. It's time to take back control of how you feel, control of how you act, and control of how you experience life. It's time to become a lifer, a new breed of overachiever focused on living every minute to its fullest. We are responsible for how we feel, and no one and no thing can make us feel anything. Emotional mastery is our journey, and emotional education and intelligence is the key. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life. What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here with the Magic for Life podcast, and I'm so excited that you joined me today because we have the amazing Len Cooper. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Michael.
Absolutely. We are so privileged and honored to have you as our guest today because I can hardly wait for all of my audience to learn from you and be able to take some of your wisdom. You have been through so much and you've done so much to help so many people. And I'm excited for our audience to get that same benefit too. So before we dig in, I want to give them an opportunity and a chance to learn about you and kind of your backstory, how you got to this point. So give us a little bit of your story and how you got here.
Wow. Okay. So I'll start off just in the beginning because it's really what shaped me. And so I grew up, my mom and my dad divorced when I was a year and a half. And so I never knew what it was like to grow up having a mom and dad at home. However, my dad is a very loving man. My mom is a very loving woman, but they just didn't get along with each other. So I have a wonderful relationship with my father. But growing up, I wasn't around him a lot and I didn't see that relationship. And so as a result of that, my mom struggled. So we ended up having to move every 2 years or so because the rent was due. And so we moved from one city to another city, typically in the middle of the night, because we just needed to have a place to be able to escape so we wouldn't have to suffer the wrath of the landlord and all of those things. And so those things shaped me. And so I grew up wanting to be a person that could provide some stability for my mom because I'm an only child. And so as a result of that, I was very close to my mom. And so when we lived in places, I was a latchkey kid at 5 years old, walking to and from school. And for those of you that are too young to understand what a latchkey kid is, that's where you have the key under your shirt and you tell nobody that you're home by yourself. This was the day before cell phones. And so I couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't answer the door. And so if she called, there was a special code, ring once, hang up, ring twice, hang up on the third time. You better pick up the phone. And so those are some of the experiences that shaped me. And so getting older, she always told me, listen, Len, you've got to go to school. You've got to get good grades. And that way you're going to have a great job. And so I figured, okay, if I had more schooling, that could give me a better job, which would get me out of this situation so I could help her have some stability in her life. And so as I went through school, I wasn't always the best student, but I was always a hardworking student. And so that work ethic kind of transcended my life in different areas. And so I graduated from college and I decided that I was going to go into business. But what I realized is that I didn't even really understand what a major was. I didn't have anybody to guide me to tell me, these are your sets of strengths and therefore you should pursue this. And these are the best colleges that has this major that's in alignment with your strength. I didn't have any of that. And so I had a conversation with my dad and I said, Dad, I want to go to college. What should I do? He says, well, why don't you go into business because they make a lot of money? I said, that sounds like a plan. So I go to college. I went to the University of California, Riverside. And I decided in my junior year that business wasn't something I wanted to do at all. And so I was very politically conscious and very much an activist in college. And so I decided to become a teacher so I can make a difference in the lives of kids, particularly students of color, because of the injustices and all of that stuff. So I went into teaching. I did that for a while and taught multiple grades. And what I realized is that I didn't have a lot of control over what happened with other kids. And in particular, there was a kid that came into my classroom from another teacher's class, and he wasn't able to succeed in her class. So instead of sending him to the principal's office, she would send him to my class. So after 3 times coming in, this young man walks up to me after all the kids walk out for recess. So I was an elementary school teacher. And he says, you know what, Mr. Cooper, I know that if I were in your class, I'd be doing a lot better in school. And so that really shaped me, because at that time, probably after about 2 weeks of contemplation, I decided to go into administration. So at 27 years of age, I became a vice principal. Then at 29, I became a school principal. And then I was working at the district office. And once I got there, I started to realize that the political scene in education wasn't in alignment with my values. And so I had a very important decision to make, because I had literally had a $200,000 education from one master to the second master's. And now I was just finishing up my doctorate, but I was at a crossroads in my life. And so ultimately, story shorter, I decided to go into the world of entrepreneurship. And I started off, I had a computer consulting company that failed because I just didn't like sitting in front of a computer all day. And then I ended up going into the financial services industry. And that's really where I found my passion. And fast forward, I've been able to do pretty well for myself. And thankfully, I got 22 offices around the country, from San Diego to New York. We've got about 1,500 active licensed agents across the country. And it's worked out pretty well. I get to travel, well, not as much right now, but travel's part of my regular routine. And I'm enjoying life right now. So that's pretty much the synopsis of my life.
Well, and you have some grown children as well, right?
I do. I have a 23-year-old and soon to be 21-year-old.
Wow. Okay. So are they all out of the house now and you guys are on your own, or are they still with you guys?
They are back in the house because of COVID right now. My older son just graduated from Hampton University in Virginia, and my younger son is going into his 4th year at Howard University in Washington, D.C. So at the moment, they're back home, but that is not part of their long-term plans.
That's awesome. And are they following in your footsteps with financial, or are they going their own routes?
Yeah, they're both going their own route. My older son is passionate about basketball, and so
Nice.
His dream is to start a company that allows students that are like your Division II type players to be able to go to college, get a scholarship, but do it between academics and athletics. And so
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And my younger son, he has it's kind of difficult to describe, but he has a clothing line, but he's more about technology and fashion. So he does a lot with coding and augmented reality. The kid is brilliant. So.
That's cool. I've seen some of his work on your page. It's really great.
Thank you.
Well, so you're now in the financial, and what was it that drew your soul to that? I mean, after all the other stuff, like why financial? I mean, a lot of people would go, oh, financial, ugh, I don't want to think about that. So why that direction?
So I'm a teacher at heart. So I enjoy helping other people get that aha moment. And as an educator, seeing the entire educational system, one of the things that I realize is that people don't really understand how money works. They don't understand the fundamental principles of money, and they don't know how to make money go to work for them. And so being an educator and understanding that that is a huge need that people don't understand, and many of them don't even know what they don't know. So me being an educator, that's another thing. The other part of it is really wanting to empower other people and coming from a place of authenticity and saying, there are millions of people in the richest country in the world that will retire and live a lackluster life because of the fact that they didn't take these concepts and principles. So if I know something that I know other people need to know, I become very passionate about it. And that's what drove me. And that's what still drives me, because of the fact that as many people as I talk to, I'm blown away by the fact that so many people go into retirement ill prepared. So
yeah, it's amazing. And it's amazing to see the work that you've done. I've been privileged to watch some of your videos and see you teaching, and it always comes across in such a way that you're not that person that is like, you need to do this and you need to do that. It always feels as though like you're our friend, and that you're just sharing a piece of information you learned that's going to really help us. And I feel like you've always, in the videos that I've watched you in, and listening to you teach, you have such a great spirit about you when you bring across that information. I think it's so necessary, because in that financial game, so many people are so embarrassed about not knowing what they didn't learn, which is really a funny position to be in, right? Like, you're embarrassed to say that you didn't learn something, which doesn't make any sense. But that's how a lot of people get into that mode. And you do such a great job of bridging that gap. How did you learn to do that? How did you learn to teach in that way?
I would say empathy is probably a strength that I had, and I've been able to cultivate it through the years. And I know what it's like to be judged, right? I know what it's like to be judged for the different stances that I've taken, the different positions that I've been in, just by virtue of being a Black man, and everything that comes with that. And as I say that, don't, take anything like I don't feel victimized or anything like that at all.
Right.
But I do understand what it feels like to be misunderstood. I know what it feels like to be judged. And so I always wanted to make sure with that empathy that I never allowed somebody to feel that I was judging them. And so I've had some people disclose many things that people would be, quote unquote, judged for or misunderstood or looked down upon for. And listen, none of us are perfect. There's nobody that's ever walked the planet amongst us mere mortals that's been perfect. And we all have our flaws and we all have our vices. And so I wanted to make sure that when I'm sitting down with somebody, regardless of what they had to disclose to me, that, listen, you not understanding how money works isn't a negative reflection of you. We, as the educational community, need to take responsibility for that. And now, once you get the information, however, now it's incumbent upon you to take that information and do something with it. If you don't know, then that's not your fault. If you do know and you don't take action then it becomes your fault. So this isn't I'm not the guy that's like coming with this kumbaya message that, once you understand that you have personal responsibility, now you are accountable for the actions you take from now moving forward.
I love that. I mean, you that personal responsibility is such a kicker, isn't it? And we teach a lot of mindset with Majic for Life, and it's so tough to get people in many instances to make that shift of taking personal responsibility about their mindset and about how they feel. And, it's sort of programmed into our language right now that he can make me angry, or she can make me upset, or my boss can make me feel bad, or any sort of outside source can make me feel a way. And you said it so beautifully there, and just being able to take that responsibility is so hard sometimes, whether it be with mindset or whether it be with finances. It's hard to do that, because that means that you are actually the one that's responsible for doing it. You also said something there about, what it's like to be judged. And so you've made it in your teaching a part of you not to judge others. And I feel like that is such a huge message for today's times, for entrepreneurs, especially that you and I talk to a lot, is that, hey, you know what, maybe reserve your judgment outward, because you wouldn't want that coming back at you either. So just focus on what you've got to do to get better and serve other people, and stop worrying about judging everybody else, is there any times or moments that stood out to you in your journey that you really are like, yeah, that was a moment where I was like, I'm never gonna be on the other side judging outward?
Oh man, I can think of lots of them. But for the sake of time, I would say a couple of them. So for example, there was a time where on my journey from being an employee to an entrepreneur, I had to go through this crossroads of mindset, because the mindset of an employee is that you need to be told what to do. You need to have a work ethic that was just enough to get by, and that the time you spent was just enough to be less than terrible to tarnish your reputation. So the mindset that I had to shift was, success is your boss, and she's a whole lot more demanding, but the flip side of that is that she's not very forceful. So if she says, hey, listen, Len, you need to get up a little bit earlier. And I'm like, no, I'm tired. She says, okay. You know what, Len, you need to read more so you can become better at your craft. I'm like, I'm not ready to read today. I want to watch Netflix. And she says, okay. And so then I come back to Success, who's my boss, and I say, hey, I want to have a yacht. I want to travel the world. And she says, remember that time that I told you you needed to study your craft more? And you said no? Well, you can't have the yacht. You can't travel the world. And so for me, the transition is that I had to realize that once I was on the other side and I adopted the mindset of excellence, I had a hard time understanding why people wouldn't adopt that mindset. And so I had to fight judging them for not, because look, we all have our own journeys, and what makes us desire success is different for all of us. And so we can't judge their journey. Maybe they have to go through some more difficulties and some more heartache to get to a place where they finally make a decision. Maybe they're at a place where we're asking them to do something that they're really not passionate about like we are. And so one of the things that I had to learn through that process was to realize that you can't change behavior. All you can do is put people in the condition to have this thing called cognitive dissonance, where it says, the path that I'm on right now isn't leading me to where I want to go. I'm at a fork in the road. I have to make the decision to go down that path less traveled, because that pathway has clouds and storms and all of that stuff. And the other one looks like bunny trails and rainbows, but that's the path that's going to lead you to least resistance, which is going to lead you right to mediocrity. And so I had to realize that it's arrogant of me to believe that I can motivate somebody or inspire them. All I can do is set up the conditions in which they become motivated or inspired.
Yeah, it's that old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I grew up around horses, and that is very true. You literally put their face right at the water, and they could have been riding for hours, and they still sometimes won't drink, but they need to. It's like, it's amazing. So when everything wasn't working out, when the money wasn't flowing and it wasn't coming in, how did you keep your emotions in check and keep yourself pushing through that, moments like that?
So I think oftentimes when we reflect on our journey and tell it, sometimes we give the impression that it was one day we had this awakening moment and this aha and this transformation in our activity change. I can tell you from personal experience that wasn't my journey. But I will tell you, the thing that kept me going in my darkest moments, besides my faith in God, was really understanding the importance of having an emotional anchor. And the emotional anchor is, why am I doing this? And so the reason why I decided to be an entrepreneur is because I wanted to change the trajectory of the Cooper family. I wanted my wife to look at me and say, you know what? I am so glad that I married this man because our family is going to be great. I wanted my kids to look at me and say, you know what? That man right there is my hero. And not for any pride or any ego, but because of the fact that I was going to change how they began to treat their children and what information and wisdom they would pass down to their children. So for me, when I got to that deep, dark place when I'm by myself and there's only the better part of me saying to do the right thing and the more compelling, convincing lower part of me that says, just take the easy way out, just quit, just go back to the land of milk and honey where you can get paid to go and trade time for dollars. I said, you know what? If I do that, then the ideas and goals and dreams and my why will never be accomplished. And if I quit right now, then I become a quitter. Now, even though I would make those decisions that would ultimately serve me and get me where I am today, there were times where mentally I quit. I was like, I'm done. And so what I realized is that sometimes I had to give myself a way out, but a temporary way out. So instead of quitting, I would just quit that hour. Instead of quitting, I would just quit that day, right? But then I'd get back up and now it's time to get back after it. And so as a result of that personal discipline, over time, I became better at it. And so even though I'm definitely far from perfect, I definitely know that my habits and my rituals are definitely a reflection of the discipline that I've harnessed over the last 12, 13 years.
It seems like discipline and hard work, from my experience and what you're saying, is something that really can be trained in, and you can actually practice it in so that you have it. What have been some of your experiences in seeing how that works? Because, I know people have come to me that don't have that discipline and that practice or that training, and I'm sure it's the same for you. How have you overcome that with your students, or even just in your own life with your family? How have you overcome being able to teach somebody how to be capable of being disciplined and working hard?
So I believe that our journey is the sum total of the books we read and the mentors we have and the experiences we overcome. And there was one book that I read by Duhigg. It's called The Power of Habit. And what he talks about is 95% of our behaviors are habit. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you put on your clothes, you get into your car, you go to work, you check your email, you make some phone calls, you go to lunch, you do that, you come back home, you eat dinner, you watch TV, you go to bed, and you do it all again. So what I realized is, okay, if 95% of the things we do is habit, that other 5% is left to chance to change those habits. So what can I do with that 5% to impact the other 95%? And so as I began to realize that there are sets of habits that serve me, and there are sets of habits that disempower me and that don't serve me. And so if I can continue to be accountable to the mentors that I have around me, and to be accountable to myself to read more books that help me develop better habits, then the experiences that I have will ultimately and gradually be better. And so in real time, I might not see from day to day that my life gets better, but if I continue to chart the journey along the way, I can look back and say, you know what, man, I've lost 20 pounds and I've been looking and weighing myself every morning, but I don't look like I feel differently today than yesterday, but I do look differently than I did 20 pounds ago. And so the same thing is true with wanting to learn a new skill. The same thing is with wanting to get better in any type of endeavor. And so that's the journey that I take. So be accountable to my mentors, make sure that I'm accountable to myself by reading and really taking stock of my experiences.
Gosh, that's so great. I'm busy writing notes. um, I hope you guys out there listening are writing notes too. Not if you're driving, okay, but but take some notes for goodness sakes. What have you found? I know your father. No girls, right? Just boys.
Just boys.
Just boys. Okay, so you're father of two. And what have you found that has worked? I mean, as parents, we all have our challenges, as they grow up and you go through the ins and outs. But what have you found has been one of the best things that you've done in terms of raising your children, so that those of us that are still raising our children can follow in your footsteps? You've got two children in college, they're doing their thing. And it's not to say that our kids don't have their challenges along the way, but you clearly figured something out.
So I would say when you for my wife and I, one, it took both of us, because during those early years of my entrepreneurial journey, she was the one that took them to basketball practice. She was the one that took them to debate. She was the one that took them around when they traveled for travel ball. And I'm forever grateful for that, because her mindset was, listen, I'm going to make sure the boys are taken care of so you can go and take care of business. And so we would plan on Sundays the week. So if there was like a really important game, like a championship game or a playoff game, I would make my schedule around that. And so as a result of that, they understood that dad had a business, and at the same time, he always took time for us as well. And so, but I didn't make every game though. So I don't want to paint this picture like, I was there, for every single game and I was there to build a business. No. There were some days that I woke up and my kids were asleep, and I would go to work and then I would come back home and they were asleep, and that would happen for days and on end. And so, but here's the thing that happened to my kids. Over time, they recognized that, one, I treated their mom with dignity and respect. They never saw me raise a hand toward her. They never heard me speak ill about her. They never heard, while we didn't always agree on everything, because marriage is not, all rose petals and, all of that. But we never hurt each other. And so they saw that example. So even though there were lessons that I taught them, some of the things that they had to observe in how we interacted as their parents is just as powerful a lesson as the things that we say out of our mouths. So what happened is, as they saw me transition from being an employee to an entrepreneur, they saw the work ethic, and I instilled within them the importance of work ethic. Now, a couple of things that I really wanted them to understand is, listen, school or college doesn't define you as a person of intellect. And you're not going to college to get a job. You're going to college to build your network. And so as you build your network, you establish relationships with people from around the world potentially. That network is the thing that's going to really take you places. And so when you do something, do it with the spirit of excellence. And so one of the things that I did with both of my boys is I took them through a rites of passage. And rites of passage is an African tradition that allows a boy to enter into manhood. And so I did that twice at two different phases in their lives with both of them. And so during those rites of passages, one of the things that I was really, it was important for me to impress upon them was a sense of doing everything you can to a degree of excellence. And so I won't say for public consumption what we did to instill that spirit of excellence within them, but I'll put it this way. They never forgot those lessons. And so when they do something, they know, listen, if you do it, you better do it to the best of your ability or don't do it at all. And so as now they're entering into their adult lives, nobody's perfect, like I mentioned, but they've really made me really proud. And I say that from the standpoint that they don't live life to make their dad proud. No, the fact that they're living their life to have a degree of excellence is what has made me proud. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what that next phase in their lives are going to look like. And I'm sure it's going to be great because they know I want them to be better than me. And I desire nothing more than to see them have more success much earlier in their lives than I did.
Well, and I'm sure, you know, your wife would have a lot to add. I've watched her in some of your interviews and she's amazing. And so we'll have to get her back on the podcast at some point, but, and ask her the same question and see,
Absolutely.
see how she,
Compare answers, right?
yeah, exactly. But, you know, I really believe based off of what you're saying that like what you focus on, you get. And when you put in that time and you know, if you focus on making things excellent, then you're going to get excellent. And it might take time. It might not come out excellent at first, but you know, it's going to get there. And so over the last 5 years, particularly, because you've been at this entrepreneurial game for a while, but over the last 5 years, what's been your primary focus in what you're doing in your entrepreneurial adventures that you're doing? Because you have a ton of people that are working with you, not necessarily for you and all of the above. You've got this little empire that you're building. And so what's been your primary focus during the last 5 years?
I would say this, just to piggyback on the last question you had, which was about parenting. One thing about parenting is that when your kids do better than you, there's a certain degree of joy. There's a certain level of satisfaction. See, there's a lot of people who want to be the king. I don't want to be the king. I want to be the king maker. And so, so for the last 5 years, my primary focus has been to help other people achieve success. And so I can tell you story after story of a couple, for example, that's in San Diego. They were at the brink. They were at their quitting point. They were ready to toss and throw in the towel. And I remember seeing something different in them. And my comment to them was, listen, if you throw in the towel now, just imagine for the rest of your life, you're going to wonder and worry about what could have been. And ultimately, they decided to move forward and not walk away. And now they're doing very well. They have a house that sits on the top of a hill with the 360-degree view of their valley, pool in the backyard that flows into and that's an infinity pool that flows into a jacuzzi. They live a great life. And I could tell you story after story after story of different people that had sexy jobs and people that don't have any college degrees and people that worked in warehouses and every aspect of the spectrum, from white to Latino to African American. We have 41 different nationalities amongst the agents that work with us. And so my primary focus is to help them get what they want. And I know that this is the one type of a business that I'm in where I can be selfish by being selfless. And so the more that I serve, the more that I'm selfless, the more that I teach, the more that I empower, the more that I can help them get what they want, then that's where my satisfaction comes. And that's really been my focus.
That's awesome. And yet I know the work that it takes to be able to put to that, but it seems so natural. And for those of you that aren't watching on video and you're just listening on the podcast, you have to go check out the YouTube video of this, but you are so authentic when you say that. And so it's so easy to know that what you're saying is what you do. And again, you know, when they see you, they're gonna know, because it's the real deal. You're the real deal. The quality of our life so often is related to the quality of our communication, not only to the people that we speak to outwards, but also to how we speak to ourselves. And in your story and in the things that you've been telling us today, you have demonstrated just sort of how you speak and how you have taught your children, how you talk to your wife, how you talk to your people that you are teaching, your audience. And so give us a little bit of insight on some of the things that you talk to yourself saying, some of the things that you say to yourself to keep you going and staying positive on a regular basis.
So it's a combination of two different things. So for me, because I am a believer, uh, my conversation with my God and my Savior is an important part of my day. And so literally when I wake up, my first conversation is with my Heavenly Father. And it's really one, I start off, the word says enter his gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise. And so that is a formula that I use that serves me. And this isn't to try to proselytize or try to do anything around conversion or anything like that. This is just the formula I use for myself. And so that's one part of it. So the day is started off by consulting my Heavenly Father and saying, okay, what would you have me to do today? Because what he would have me to do takes precedence over everything else. And then the second part of that is once I am up, I make sure that I don't look at my phone, I don't look at my email, I don't do any of that for the first hour of my day. Why? Because I don't want other influences to capture my day and snatch it away from me. I want to be in control of that. So the second part of my morning ritual is to really look at, okay, what did you do yesterday? And I literally do this. What did you do yesterday that went well? What did you do yesterday that you could have done better? What are you going to do today that's going to take you closer to where you need to go? And what are some distractions you need to avoid? And so that self-talk is literally going on throughout the day. Hey, listen, Len, you're getting off track. You're allowing, see that phone call right there? If you answer that phone, that's an hour conversation. Are you ready to do that right now? No? Okay, let's keep it moving. That conversation right there, ooh, you need to have that conversation. Even though you don't feel like it, you got to take that call. And so the self-talk that I do is literally what is that battle between, again, like I referred to earlier, my greater self and my lesser self. And on days that my greater self can defeat my lesser self, I call it a win. But there are some days that my lesser self, my lower self, captures the best of me. And then I just have to regroup and get after it the next day.
Well, I think so many entrepreneurs will be able to resonate with that and really feel what that is, because I feel like there is, for all of the entrepreneurs that I get to speak to on a regular basis, there's this element where it's like we're fighting the natural laziness of man, and just trying to go against that, because there's this idea like, oh yeah, I'd love to go sit on the beach for hours, and and I think one of the things that is really cool is when we hear that other entrepreneurs are going through that as well, and that they're winning the battle, and that they're winning that fight. And so it's really inspiring. And earlier you were talking about motivation, but I think you are very motivational in your speaking, and I appreciate that about you. And so it's really great, because sometimes you get the rah the people that are yelling and screaming, and for me, I appreciate the intelligence and the education behind the motivation, because to me that's sustainable. It's great, and there's nothing wrong with being pumped up, and there's nothing wrong with being rah, because you need that too. But at the same time, the intelligence that you've demonstrated in your words and in your experience is beautiful, because it has legs and it has strength behind it. And that's so cool to listen to. In your journey, you've clearly had to go through moments and times in business and family, even back all the way to the beginning of your story, where worry and fear would creep in. And along the way, you've learned to deal with worry and fear and manage it and control it. Can you give us some insights as to how you've learned to do that? How have you learned to manage and control worry and fear?
So I would say that There's another word that I want to throw in there in addition to worry and fear. And I think that it all has to do with how we process time. And let me explain what I mean by that. If we reflect in the past and we look upon the things that we didn't do, regret becomes a real emotion that impacts us in a negative way. Fear and worry is because we try to look into the future and get concerned about all of the things that could happen. And so while I have been impacted by regret because of the mistakes I've made in the past, and while I do from time to time worry about the future because I really want to have the path of least resistance, even though I know it doesn't serve me, the place that I really want to allow my life to stay most consistent is to be in the present, because I know that right here, right now, I can control how I think. I can control what I do with this 24 hours a day that I have. And the moment that I start to go into worry mode, I start thinking about what could happen, what possibly could happen, and what might happen. And the thing is, I can't do anything about that. And so even though I find myself engaged in those emotions from time to time, because now I understand what that is and the negative impact and the fact that it doesn't serve me, I can catch it. Because if I do it out of ignorance, then I stay in that negative emotional state in a place that I constantly can't do anything about. So that whole thing is, give me the ability to not worry about those things that I can't control, and give me the strength to take care of those things that I can control, and give me the wisdom to understand the difference between those two. And if I can just from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, develop that habit of being present, then gradually over time, what's happened in the past and what could happen in the future don't really have any relevance in my life.
That's awesome. That's really so eloquently put. Um, so I want to go into our speed round that we like to do at the end of our interviews, and it's pretty easy once you get going. And I call it our go-to emotions. And so when things are going really well, I'll give you a category. And when things are going well, what are your go-to emotions? And when things are going poorly, what are your go-to limiting emotions? And so we try to jump through this quickly so that we can get to know you.
Okay.
We haven't already, but okay. So here's the first category. In business, what's your go-to emotion when everything's working and going good?
My go-to emotion is gratitude, because I want to be present when something is going well, because gratitude helps me not be too full of myself.
Nice. And when in business, when things are going poorly, what's your go-to limiting emotion?
Uh, self defeat, doubt, thinking I'm not good enough.
Awesome. And in partnerships, in business partnerships, when things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Uh, thankfulness to the other person, because when things go well, it's their fault, and when things go poorly, it's my fault.
Okay. And so in partnerships, what's your go-to limiting emotion when things are going poorly?
That I got to get better. It's I don't know a word for that, but I would say determination.
Yeah. And in coaching, we have two sides of this one. So the first side we'll talk about is when you are being the coach. What is your go-to emotion when things are going well?
Ooh, that's a good one. Excitement.
Okay. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting emotion?
Anguish. I hate losing.
I feel you. Okay. And when I know for a fact that you couldn't have gotten here, I couldn't have gotten here, without a coach, without somebody mentoring us and helping us get there. So when you're being coached and everything's going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Uh, Determination. I want to make sure that I come through for my coach.
Nice. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting emotion?
To get better, but I don't know a word that goes with that.
Okay.
Because some of those words are the same, but in different contexts. Because determination works for me in that context as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense. And that's the challenge with emotions, is that from an academic standpoint, they want to put an actual word and define it. But the problem is we all define happy different. And so it kind of defeats the purpose. So I always tell people that if you feel blah, that is that is an emotion. Sorry, academics. Sorry to mess you up, but if you feel blah, that is a thing, and you know what it feels like. You may not have a fancy description for it, but you still feel blah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in your relationship, when things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Love.
Okay. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting emotion?
Boredom.
Okay. And with your kids, when things are going well, what's your go-to?
Oh my goodness. It's love, but for my kids in a different way.
Yeah, totally. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting emotion?
It is anger.
Okay. Thank you for being honest and playing along with that, because it's just I think it's so helpful for us as entrepreneurs. We're all going through different journey, different struggles, and yet there are some emotions like those in those different categories that we all feel, and that we all can go, oh yeah, oh, somebody else, at least I'm not alone on an island by myself trying to get to this place. But I sure appreciate you, and I sure appreciate your journey and what you have learned so that we can have a shorter journey. And I think that's really awesome. You have a lot of things you're doing. You have a lot of projects you're doing, and a lot of people that you influence in a positive way. I want to give you a shot to let our audience know all the things that you're up to and how they can find you, and how they can get in touch and maybe even work with you. So share with us some of those things, some of those projects, and anything that you're up to these days.
Oh my. So first of all, I just want to say that it's definitely been a pleasure getting to know you and the great work you're doing. And I remember our previous conversation and how your journey through professional dance has led you here. And, so I'm really, really excited about what you're doing. For me, you can find us for me on Instagram at Dr. Len Cooper. I give some anecdotes about just business and entrepreneurship. Website, lenandtasha.com. That's a website that just talks about the institution of being in business and in marriage as well. And then we have a podcast called Peace of Mind. That's PIECE, Peace of Mind. And our goal is to liberate 1 million minds. And what we defined as liberation is we want them to be liberated spiritually, financially, emotionally, whatever that's holding them back. The goal is that, because of the fact that as an entrepreneur, there's a difference between where you are and where you want to be, and we want to help people close that gap. And so what I do in my business is I teach people who are entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs to learn the field of financial services so they can first apply those concepts in their own lives and then eventually empower and help other people to do that in theirs. And so all of those things we do, we're just simply on a journey looking to always get better and improve. And so thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to put all those links below in the description. So if you're watching us on YouTube, they'll be in the comments or in the description area. If you're watching or listening on any of the podcast channels, you can find all of that stuff in the description so that you can connect with Len and make sure you get to know him, make sure you utilize his amazing journey to your benefit. It was once said to me, like, why would you not pick up a book of somebody's entire lifetime and read that? Because you can read it in a couple hours. Even if it took you a week, you still put into that time or into that week somebody else's entire life journey and their lessons learned. And so, in moments like this, when we get to meet people like you and learn from your journey and your path, I'm so grateful and honored that you'd share it with us. And I can honestly say, guys, go listen to Len, go find his stuff, go connect with him, and you will improve your life. So thank you so much, Len, for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you. And I look forward to being able to do some more stuff with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Happiness is a choice. Sadness is a choice. All emotions are a choice. Sometimes doing our emotions doesn't seem like it's our choice, but it is. You have control. You are the captain of your ship, and you must learn how to be the best captain you can be. Let me show you how. Pick up your free copy of my new book, Every Minute, at everyminutebook.com.